Good morning, everyone. Welcome to week 11 of PPA 551. We are so close to the end. We are down to our final sprint here. We've got our final deliverables due for our workforce plans, and we're going to be wrapping up here some of those final components of our SURE model, starting today with training and professional development. Training and professional development is perhaps my favorite part of HR because it is all about building human capital and creating programs that serve so many purposes, from increasing retention to creating successful succession planning strategies. Training and development really helps accomplish all of these different things. Training and development can refer to anything that improves the skills of employees and develops their capacity to cope with the changing demands of the work environment. A lot of what goes into a strong training and development program includes a lot of discussions around something called change management, which is essentially the strategies we use to help ourselves and others through times of change. This change can look like a bunch of different things. It can include changes in goals and priorities. It can include new equipment and new softwares. This is something that you see in organizations constantly. New laws and regulations, particularly in the worlds of nonprofits, the laws and regulations can change quite a bit. And public safety. Public safety is one that we see changing quite a bit, and it requires a lot of flexibility and agility from our bureaucrats. Economic fluctuations, obviously a serious one. COVID-19 created perhaps the greatest change in our workforce that we've seen since, I would say, probably the 1950s. We have increased pressure from stakeholders, whether it be our customers, our boards of directors, our elected officials, or just the residents that we're serving. And then the actions of competitors, particularly when you're looking at the nonprofit sector. Competition has become more and more of a critical component of keeping up in the nonprofit sector. And so understanding competitors' actions can also create significant times of change. Training and development really is about developing and improving the KSAOCs to help your employees learn new skills, abilities, and improve their performance in their workplace. Training and development is something that, just like everything else we've talked about, must be strategic, must be planned, it must be budgeted, it must be institutionalized, it must have a structure behind it in order for you to be able to accomplish those long-term development goals. The training process generally involves five fundamental steps, which starts with developing objectives. What are the reasons why we want to have this specific type of training program? Developing a curriculum methodologically. How are you structuring a training to ensure that your students are actually learning what you want them to learn? How are you making sure they get to those outcomes? And then the techniques. This is the actual delivery of the training, right? What are the ways that we are going to actually do the training to achieve these outcomes? And then actually holding the training. It's a skill that a lot of HR employees don't have out the gate, something that people need to learn, but having the ability to deliver and facilitate a training is really important. And then, of course, having the structures and the data in place to evaluate whether or not a training program is successful. One of the ways you can start that first step of developing objectives is through a needs assessment. So a training needs assessment would be understanding the difference between what our current state is with our training and what the future state of our training needs to look like. It also discerns whether performance deficiencies can be eliminated by a training. Does the training actually help us achieve the performance outcomes that we're looking for? And one of the final needs assessment components is whether or not this is something we can do internally or something we need to send people off to find. Is it an on the job training, or is it an external training that we need to send our employees to? When you're conducting a needs assessment for your trainings, you're including a bunch of the stuff that we've already talked about today with some new strategies that you need to consider as well. So job analysis, that's something we've talked about quite a bit. Having a job analysis to understand where those gaps in those KSAOCs are. Surveys and interviews with incumbents and supervisors. One of the most important types of interviews you can do with training and development is a exit interview. Exit interviews will tell you why employees are leaving the workplace. And if one of your goals is retention, you want to understand why they're leaving and if training and development can help them get there. You want to have strong performance evaluations. You want to understand the criticisms or complaints of the organization. What about changing and pending laws, regulations, or operating procedures? Are there pending changes that you know are going to kick in at the first of the year that you need your employees to be ready for? And then requests. This is something that in my workplace we've dealt with quite a bit. There has been a large desire to have more trainings around things like change management because of the work culture that has developed over the last couple of years. When you're developing those objectives, you're essentially creating statements that specify a desired KSAOC that you want your employees to have. Objectives provide that standard measuring stick that you use to determine whether or not a training has been successful. You have to have specific objectives, a lot like if you've ever heard of the SMART goals model, your specific, measurable, aspirational, realistic, and time bound goals. Same thing for objectives here. You want to have objectives that are measurable and specific. You want also collaborative development, whether this is collaborative within the HR department or you're bringing in the employees that you know are going to be primary constituents of this training, and you're bringing them in and talking to them about what they're expecting to get out of it. And best practices in terms of determining your objectives include your declarative or factual knowledge, what we're doing, procedural knowledge, how we're doing it, and motivation of how we're going to get people there. When you're developing a curriculum, this is something that is going to start creeping into maybe some worlds that you may not have seen before in your career of education, right? When you're developing a curriculum for a training, you have to understand how an information will be absorbed, processed, and retained. This is the process of how people learn, whether it's through cognitive learning, behavioral learning, or constructivism learning. Each of these are different learning strategies that you have to understand when developing the curriculum. This also provides the necessary information and should be part of the development of what our objectives are to achieve specific KSAOCs. There's an important distinction between on-the-job instruction and off-the-job classroom instruction, right? Is this a training that you want people to be able to do over the lunch in the middle of a workday, or is this something where you need to send your employees off for a couple of weeks, a couple of days to learn those specific skills? When you're developing your curriculum, it's not as imposing as you might think. It's really starting with a series of questions that you have to be able to answer before you start a new training program. The first is, what is the prior knowledge needed? One of the things that when I develop out my training curriculums at work, one of the things I start with is, what is the base level knowledge I need my students to have before coming into a training opportunity? And through that, what we've done is we've created prerequisite videos and reading that are required before coming into a training to understand that we're all starting at least with the same base of knowledge. You also need to know the level of education. One of the biases that you're going to run into, whether or not it's something that you actively engage with, is that you are going to be a master's level educated employee. And so understanding what the average employee, what the employees you're targeting are, what their level of education is, and being able to cater the experience to them is really important. What are the expectations of your employees? This is something, whether it's a tangible skill that you want them to know, or an understanding of a process or a new policy that you want them to know. What are those expectations? Then you want to understand, this is something that is a really critical component that gets missed all the time. What is the relationships and attitudes and the knowledge level with one another? Is it something that we understand that we have strong relationships and a strong work culture? Or is this something that we have to understand that there's a relationship, there's specific relationship imbalances that we have to be able to understand? Are our employees prepared for a technical instruction or not? Or do they have those prerequisite abilities? What's going on in the agency or in the organization that may influence participants' attitudes about the training? When I conduct my or my process improvement trainings, one of the things I always lead with is, here's the current state of our organization. Here's why we are here. And developing the curriculum around that why is really important to make it useful for people. And then voluntary or mandatory trainings. Is this something that we have the enforcement capacity to make a mandatory training, or is this something that we want employees to opt into? All of this is important when developing that curriculum. And then there's a bunch of different ways in which we can design a curriculum to get our students to those outcomes. The different methods include mentoring or shadowing. Mentoring programs are very, very popular, particularly with larger organizations that you want to develop lifelong incumbent employees. Just a straight lecture. This is sometimes useful, but it also plays into that level of education and that comfort level with that type of educational instruction, right? Role playing, this is acting out, seeing the physical interactions between employees. You could start with case studies. So a lot of times what we like to do, especially for our executive level employees, is send them to specific locations to learn about specific things that we want them to learn about. Whether it's a specific type of policy and we want to send them to another organization to learn how that organization is dealing with that policy, or if it's specifically bringing in speakers from specific case study organizations or experiences that we can understand. Experiential exercises. So this is stuff where you're actually going through the motions of what you're trying to get your students to learn. Are there audiovisual methods involved? Are there videos? Is it a PowerPoint slide? Is it, what are the specific things you're doing? Programmed instruction and information, and then computer-based training, right? Is this something, we have a lot more trainings. Your EVERFI training is one that is based off of a computer-based training program, and those have their pros and cons as well. You've got community resources, learning networks, communities of practice that you can develop, as well as e-learning and information and computer technologies as well. What are the ways that we can leverage our technological resources? And it's important to just understand that every training method has its pros and cons depending on what you're trying to accomplish. When we're actually delivering the training, it's about understanding our audience and understanding what our outcomes are supposed to be. So we'll start with what is the content and the amount of information that needs to be learned. How do those people learn? One of the skills that my team really focuses on when we're conducting a training is really keeping an eye on the engagement of our participants, right? If the participants are starting to disengage, can we use a different type of strategy to engage the different types of learners in the room? Should there be a pilot program? Are we piloting out some new program before launching it citywide? Something we do quite a bit in my workplace. Is this something that you want to start in a specific organization? If we're at the federal government, do you want to start it within specific teams or divisions before moving on to different agencies and departments? Should supervisors participate in the training prior to the staff? This is something that is really difficult because you want supervisor buy-in, but a lot of times supervisors aren't the one actually doing the work, and so they're not the ones that we actually need the skills for. So is this something that you want their buy-in first by putting them through the training? Is there sequencing for our training programs? Is this something where it's a series of different training opportunities versus one individual opportunity? Will participants need practice? Do you need follow-up afterwards? Excuse me. What is the retention and transfer of skills or knowledge? Is this something that we are going to be checking in with them to make sure that they're retaining these skills and these abilities? And then do trainees need the opportunity to practice these skills on the job, especially when you're training around new policies and procedures? This is something that you may want to design your training in a way that achieves those specific outcomes by practicing with actual customers and actual employees. And then after we host a training, after we put people through it, we want to evaluate. We want to know whether or not the training is actually doing what we want it to do. Evaluations can do a couple of different things, much like a test at the end of a class may do. We're measuring knowledge, we're measuring changes in skill level. We're measuring attitude changes, behavioral changes, and then we're also measuring the changes of the effectiveness at the individual or agency level. What are those outputs that we're looking for? Those lag measures that show us that a training program has been successful. And then there's 4 different levels at which a training program can be evaluated. It's how people react to it, measuring whether a learning has occurred. That's more of a test type Evaluation measures if job behavioral changes occurred. This is a follow-up. This is when we're linking our trainings directly to those KSAOCs. And then those final results ideally linked to improving organizational performance. Are we measuring based off of our objectives? Now, all of this is about change. It's all about getting people to change. I'll be posting some additional resources on Canvas specifically around change management because it's an important component of the human element of public and nonprofit management. And so change, when we want employees to change, when we want organizations to change, even if it's just about changing our performance levels or changing the specific outcomes we're looking for, you have to have a couple of different components built into it. One, an employee must want change. Must desire the ability to change. Employees have to know what that change looks like, what they do, how they do it. There also must be the appropriate climate in the workplace for that change. If you've got a climate of a lot of turnover and a lot of retraining consistently, it may be more difficult to enact this change. And then employees must be rewarded for changing. Are they receiving that recognition? Are they receiving some extra level of compensation or benefit that they're receiving based off of this change? Those first two are the things that we can accomplish through training. The latter two is based off of leadership in the large case. It's based off of the organizational or agency direction as well. Training is an important component in all of this, but to be able to accomplish full transformational change, you have to have that leadership as well as the training. Another great avenue for training and development is around career development. One of the things that modern HR really wants to focus on is developing and investing in our personnel, investing in our human capital, just like we would invest with any of our physical or real capital as well. Um, for career development, we're providing knowledge as skills to be used in the future. If employees have a specific track that they want to follow, what are the skills that they're going to need to be able to move up? It also prepares employees to meet future agency needs, ensuring the organization's survival. This is something we may refer to as, or you may hear referred to as, organizational resilience, right? When changes occur, is your human capital ready to respond? Then it also improves skill levels of and provides long-term opportunities for the organization's present workforce. This is all about, improving succession planning and retaining employees. Career development can be a really important component to that. For those of you specifically interested in nonprofit, particularly with professional development in nonprofit, there are excellent resources from the Nonprofit Leadership Alliance that you can take advantage of, as well as for our leadership development in the public sector as well. The Office of Personnel Management out of the federal government has these resources available for you. It's how they develop those high level general service employees in the federal government before they move into that SES, that senior executive service level. Um, Another type of training that we need to keep in mind is managerial and executive development. This leadership training, leadership development is a huge factor in the especially growing organizations. And so you're developing your managerial and executive leadership as well as your leadership pipeline to have critical skills around problem solving, taking initiative and encouraging initiative, functioning as a team player, improving interpersonal skills, and giving people the opportunity to be creative during times of change. That's another important component there. Um, Really, what I want to close out this shorter lecture here today on is human capital theory, and training is specifically developed with human capital theory in mind, where human capital theory essentially states that workers invest in their own productive skills through education and training opportunities in order to improve their work outcomes, whether that's through higher wages or through some sort of other motivation that individual employees have. You think about this as a lot like our financial assets that we may invest to earn income, right? The same thing goes with human capital, that our KSAOCs, our personal KSAOCs are things that we can invest in order to achieve some sort of motivated outcome that we have. A very excellent reading on Canvas around the NLSY 79. This is an awesome traditional resource on human capital theory, particularly um, in this HR space that's well worth reading and engaging with. When we're talking about human capital theory, training is integral in ensuring that people have the ability to invest their human capital. When we're looking for wages, we're looking for off-the-job training, apprenticeship training from previous employers. We're also looking at on-the-job training. Are there training opportunities that can increase your marketability within the organization and improve your wages there? Are there apprenticeship opportunities within your current employer? Are there specific job training that only raises wages at the job, or is there general training that raises wages at the job and other jobs? All of these are factors that people take into consideration when making decisions about investing their human capital. If we want to instead focus on mobility, we're either trying to encourage or discourage mobility through formal on-the-job training that may increase retention, or off-the-job training that may increase mobility. What are people interested in? What are people motivated by? That is a huge component of human capital theory. And so whether you're talking about specific or general training, each may have a different effect on mobility or retention as well. So in general, training is not just, the one training you may have to go to that's required by your boss. It is actually a systematic process by which employees learn the KSAOCs necessary to do their jobs and advance in their careers. Career development is a continuous process of evaluating abilities and their interest, establishing career goals, and really this is where we start getting into how training and development leads to our strategic human resource management program. Is our goal to improve mobility, or is our goal to improve retention? Are we focused on improving on the job performance, or are we focused on improving work culture? Each of the different types of trainings may have a different component linked with that. Agencies that are strongly considering training and career development should constantly monitor, evaluate, and revise their trainings and career development programs. Training and development is an ongoing iterative process. You do not set it is not your Instapot. It is not a set and forget sort of strategy. We really need to have the ability to continuously evaluate and take the opportunity to learn more about what our trainings actually mean for people. That is all I have for you today. A little bit of a shorter lecture today, but training and development, absolutely an incredible component of a lot of the work that I do on a personal level, as well as a huge growing component of HR management in the public sector specifically. So I want to thank you all. Please, please, please reach out if you have any questions or concerns with your workforce plans, and we will start the discussion next week on our Build a City program and where we're going to be able to go from there. So I appreciate you all. We will talk soon.